Our next speaker this morning is Dr. Wu Xin, who comes to us from Fudan University in Shanghai, where she is professor in the Department of History and plans to return to the States. So Dr. Wu has numerous truly groundbreaking publications on Achaemenid Central Asia, including her 2020 chapter, Central Asia in the Achaemenid Period, which is now an invaluable point of reference for any study of the Achaemenid Northeast. Currently, she is working on a monograph entitled Persia and the East. What is more, since 2010, she has been co-directing a joint archaeological project at Kyzyltepa, an Achaemenid to Hellenistic period site in southern Uzbekistan. Today, she gives a paper entitled On Origin of Fire Temple and the Achaemenid Domination in Central Asia, Evidence from Kyzyltepa. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Emma, for the introduction, and thank you, Professor Rollinger, and thank you, Professor Shaigan, for the invitation, and Astrid, thanks for bearing through the the visa stress with me. So there's no way that I can talk anywhere close to math sophistication, so I'll keep everything very simple. I'll start now. Among the many long debated issues surrounding the origin of the Zoroastrian religion, one unresolved question is when and where Fire Temple was first established. The question is particularly important because the Temple of the Sacred Fire is the only standardized form of temple of the Zoroastrian religion. The establishment of the Fire Temple, which serves at the center of the Zoroastrian ritual life, was a major milestone during the long development of the religious belief in Central Asia since the early or mid-2nd millennium BCE. The establishment of the Fire Temple signifies that Zoroastrianism existed as a religious institution rather than merely a faith. But most scholars believe that Zoroastrianism as a religion already came into being during the Achaemenid Empire. Little archaeological evidence from Iran or Central Asia demonstrates that the Fire Temple indeed existed in the Achaemenid period. Mary Boyce, in her seminal paper on the Zoroastrian temple cult of fire, quote unquote, asserted that the temple was institutionalized during the late Achaemenid period, around the 4th century BCE. Its initial construction was under the impetus of the great king of the Achaemenid Empire, and its early transmission was dependent on the Achaemenid imperial administrative network. This theory has been accepted by many scholars of the field, but it has met more rejections in recent years. Excavations in the past 2 decades or so in Central Asia have revealed a number of remains of ritual structures. Some of them have been attributed to the Zoroastrian religion. The new discoveries inspired renewed discussions on the question of when and where Zoroastrian Fire Temple was first established. Drawn on the latest archaeological discoveries at Kyzyltepa in Uzbekistan, marked in that red dot, I argue that Central Asia witnessed the early development of the fire temples, and the Persian domination over Central Asia may have increased the pace towards the institutionalization of fire temples. After a brief review of the relevant material from Central Asia, this paper delves into the architectural history of the ritual structure at Kyzyltepa, which is perhaps one of the earliest examples of the fire temples, to review on microscale the process through which fire temples were established and expanded by placing the temple in the historical and political context of Achaemenid Central Asia, The paper argues that the imperial participation of the old Persian Empire may have played an important role in the must have played an important role in the development of the Zoroastrian fire temples. Before I delve into the problem, I'd like to clarify a few things. Number one, I'm not capable and thus not intended to discuss here whether it is more proper to use the term Zoroastrianism, Mazdaism, or other terms to describe the religion behind the fire temple, which later became the standard form of the temple of Zoroastrianism. Second, the development of both Zoroastrianism and fire temple is a process. It is anticipated that the temples would take different forms during the periods when it was first incepted and when it was finally canonized. In other words, it would not be a surprise that the forms of the fire temples of the Achaemenid period differ from that of the Sasanian period and afterwards. Third, in identifying the remains of a fire temple, I follow the principle that Paul Bergna and Franz Grenet put forward, which is to see within a structure, fire should be the main and only focus. The building should not contain extensive evidence for daily life, but should contain material associated with Zoroastrian ritual activities. Using this as guideline, I propose that the ritual structure at Kyzyltepa is one of the earliest fire temples. Before I give detailed information about Kyzyltepa, I'd like to offer a rough outline of the religious landscape of Central Asia in the Achaemenid period. This is drawn on the basis of textual, archaeological, and ethnographic evidence from Central Asia. My paper on this subject is forthcoming, hopefully in this month. Thus, I hereby give only the essential information. Divine names in the Aramaic documents from ancient Bactria indicates that deities from multiple strands of religious beliefs coexisted in Central Asia during the Achaemenid period. For example, there is a text mentioning white flour and wine were distributed as offering for the temple of Bel, a Mesopotamian deity, personal names containing the names of the Iranian deity Mithra and Tyr, and local deities Margiana and Vash, which are likely genii of the land of Margiana and the Oxus River, demonstrate their reverence in Bactria. Name of Ahura Mazda, although not as popular as Vash, indicates that he also indeed had his followers in Central Asia. A number of archaeological remains of ritual and religious structure have been excavated in Sogdia and Bactria in Central Asia. Their locations are shown on the map. This include, for example, platforms from Kyzyltepa, Kyzyltepa, and Pachmartepe. This is the platform at Kyzyltepa. Temples excavated at Sangirtepe, Kyzyltepa, and Kyzyltepa are found all in Uzbekistan. So this is the temple in Sangirtepe, Kyzyltepa, and Kyzyltepa. A monumental stone fire altar found on a hilltop rock spur at Chashmashafa in northern Afghanistan is also among the structures. Here is a more detailed map showing the locations of these remains. The ritual structure seems to generally echo the ritual and the religious landscape drawn based on the administrative texts from ancient Bactria. Although the nature of the structures is still subject to debate, more scholars seem to accept that Kyzyltepa may represent an early or proto-form of a fire temple. Its 4 columns have been compared to the later form of the fire temple or chartag, and a corridor with 9 pits, which may manifest the Zoroastrian cleaning rituals, as Frank Grenet has pointed out. The diverse religious practice were also reflected through artifacts from the Oxus treasure housed in the British Museum. A beautiful gold figurine with a typical Achaemenid iconography of a winged bull wearing a crown and an Aramaic inscription showing dedication to Vaksh, the name of the deity of the Oxus River, confirms the popularity of the deity among the local elite. This is also supported by the model of a goldfish from the treasure, which I have attributed to the cult of the Oxus in the upcoming paper. Regarding the Zoroastrian religion, a gold plaque showing a figure holding barsam and wearing padam is almost certainly a priest. His association with Zoroastrianism can further be supported by the similarity of him and what is identified as Srosh, the deity protecting the soul of dead in Zoroastrianism. The latter is depicted on the wall painting of a religious structure in Khwarezmian of 1st to 2nd century AD at Achaemenid in Karachi, Pakistan, Uzbekistan. They both wear kaftans with decorations running from the neck down to the knee in the front, and Akanaka sword, and a pair of pants decorated with birds, which Franz Grenet suggests to be associated with the Zoroastrian deity. In other words, textual, archaeological, and iconographic evidence from Central Asia or suggests that Zoroastrianism is among the multiple strands of religious belief of the region during the Achaemenid period. Now, let's look at the material from Kyzyltepa. Kyzyltepa is an Iron Age archaeological site located in the Mishardi Oasis in the upper Suhandaria Valley in southern Uzbekistan. The site is about 40 kilometers to the northeast of Kyzyltepa, which has the proto or the earliest fire temple. The site, together with more than 10 small settlements around it, formed one of the largest and most important Iron Age archaeological complexes in Central Asia. The site was excavated in the 1970s by Sadulayev and Hakimov, and again in the 2010s under the co-directorship of me and Dr. Leonid Svechkov of the Institute of the Fine Arts of the Republic of Uzbekistan, to whom I show my great gratitude. The excavation revealed that Kyzyltepa, which later became a larger fortified site of about 13 to 14 hectares, was constructed around a ritual site at its southwestern corner. Ceramic and radiocarbon samples date the site to the Achaemenid and early Hellenistic periods. Both constructed in the Achaemenid period, the temple at Kyzyltepa predate the Kyzyltepa. The fire temple of Kyzyltepa is located in the southwestern corner of the site, on top of a natural loose hill surrounded by water, occupying the highest point of the settlement. The temple can be seen from everywhere of the Mishardi Oasis. Strategic evidence suggests that the temple was built on top of an older structure, likely a platform. The building had 3 consecutive phases. In its initial phase, the temple appears to be a freestanding building. It is very similar to the Kyzyltepa temple in size and in plan. It is accessed through two doorways. One was led from the plain below through a ramp that wraps around it. The structure contained a sanctuary and a corridor-like room. The sanctuary was dominated by a large square fire altar of 7 by 7 meters. Fire holes and pure ash and sand on the burnt surface suggest the altar was used in rituals involving fire. Several layers of mud indicate that altar surface was renewed frequently. This altar has a podium attached to it to the south. Two pits containing residue of burning, such as ash, slags, burnt mud pieces, and what appears to be zeolite, a mineral used for improving fire retardancy and lowering fire toxicity. On the northern side of the altar, there was a rectangular pit with waterproof material covering its walls, which indicates that it was perhaps used as a bathtub for ritual cleansing. In the southwestern corner of the room was a square platform and attached podium. The setup is almost identical to the big altar in the middle of the room. A pit with pure ash and sand below the podium suggests that the platform must have had a ritualistic function. But the nature of its function is not clear because we did not uncover the surface of the platform. As you can see, there's one last layer of mud bricks. How stupid I was. In the second stage of the cultic structure, the layout inside of the shrine remained largely unchanged. However, an antechamber and a large building with a two-tiered platform, or the citadel, was built around it. Ritual pits with stones similar to the foundation pits found at Kyzyltepa have been discovered in the foundation of the platform. In the third stage, the sanctuary room was partially reconfigured. A small fire temple of rectangular shape, which is about 2 by 1.4 meters, were built on a cardinal direction in the southern part of the shrine. The altar, made of pure loess, had a deep fire hole. Its surface, which was very hard and dark gray to black in color, indicate a long exposure to fire. This is very different from the surface of the big altar, which is soft and covered by layers of mud that was easy to peel off. The functions of the two altars may thus be different. The small altar was perhaps used to maintain an everlasting fire, whereas the larger one was used during the major ceremonies and was constantly renewed. A big, coarse, low-fired terracotta pan, which is about 30 centimeters in diameter, has been found on the podium attached to the big fire temple. Soot on the edge of the pan indicates that it was perhaps used to transfer the kindled fire. Found next to the pan is a stone pestle, which must have been used together with some stone mortar. Many pestles and mortars have been discovered at Kyzyltepa. It is possible that some of them may have been used to prepare for homa drinks, which is essential in the Zoroastrian ritual activity. Based on the material, I believe that the ritual structure at Kyzyltepa is one of the earliest fire temples. At the end of the third phase, the fate of the Kyzyltepa temple changed significantly. A partition wall was built across the sanctuary, cutting the cellar and the big fire altar into two halves. The entire southern section of the room was completely filled up with carefully laid mud bricks from the from the floor all the way up. A small grindstone slab was placed upright outside the southern doorway, which was blocked by them to perhaps signal the ritual death of this section of the building. The southern half of the shrine, including the half of the big altar and the whole small altar, continued to function. The northern half of the shrine, including half of the big altar, continued to function for some time. After a certain period of time, its northern section was also filled up. It was filled up quickly with pasa and earth, this time not carefully laid mud bricks. And the doorway leading into this part of the shrine is also blocked by mud bricks. But this is not the end of the religious life at Kyzyltepa. A fire platform was built on top of the temple. The location remained secret until the site was completely abandoned. Ceramic evidence suggests that the final failing of the fire temple occurred during the early Hellenistic period. By this time, the temple at Kyzyltepa was also filled up in a similar fashion, indicating major political and cultural transformation in northern Bactria. Such transformation is probably related to the invasion of Alexander the Great, and consequently the Hellenization of Central Asia. To summarize, the Kyzyltepa temple was first established on a sacred spot during the Achaemenid period, when the site became a major center and perhaps political and economic base for the Achaemenid imperial power in the east. Through the construction of the citadel around it, the temple may have expanded into a major religious center of the region. As I have argued elsewhere, the flourishing of Kyzyltepa is closely associated with the Achaemenid investment in the east. The administrative text from Bactria documents showing wine and white flour from the satrapal storehouse were distributed as sacrifice for the temple of Bel in Bactria, exemplifies such official investment to the local institution, among which perhaps also the Zoroastrian temples, whose existence can now be supported by textual, visual, and archaeological evidence. Within this context, the construction and expansion of the fire temple at the site are also likely part of the imperial investment. And the expansion of the temple to be enclosed into a citadel may indicate more investment, but at the same time, increased control over the temple, probably by the agents of the Greek king. The temple at Kyzyltepa was filled up when the Achaemenid power in Central Asia waned. The construction and expansion of the temple under the Achaemenid domination and the destruction of it upon the Greek invasion cannot be merely a coincidence. Instead, it is a manifestation of what the great king did for the Zoroastrian religion. Before finishing my talk, I'd like to mention that the filling up of the temple at Kyzyltepa and transformation of it into a fire platform afterwards remind what happened to Tepe Nushirjan, the Nushirjan temple in the Median heartland in the Zagros. At Kyzyltepa, before the southern door was blocked, two pits with tunnels branching out were dug inside of the shrine. I initially think that they were dug as hideouts for temple treasures, but John Curtis kindly draw my attention to the tunnel at the Nushirjan temple. Can they both represent a practice of ritual destruction? There is also a pit which is dug on the big altar when the northern side of the shrine was abandoned. In the beginning, we thought it was a looter's pit. Now I'm rethinking about it. Can it also represent a similar ritual practice of destruction? The similarities suggest some sort of links between the temple at Nushirjan and the fire temple at Kyzyltepa. It is certainly the time to reopen the files of Nushija for another look of its nature so that we can really start to discuss the origin of the Zoroastrian fire temples. Thank you.